The topic that I will be discussing is the Panic of 1893. The Panic of 1893 was an economic depression in the United States that occurred that year and lasted until 1897. The depression was brought on because of the collapse of railroad overbuilding and shaky railroad financing. In one day, investors dumped 1 million shares of the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad and it went bankrupt. This resulted in bank failures and it affected big businesses and everyday people. When the banks failed, people lost their money and were unable to afford necessities. The banks also supplied loans to big businesses. Due to the failure of the bank, big businesses were unable to receive loans. Since the big businesses could not receive loans, they failed and put many people into unemployment. As expected, people were frightened and they started to quickly sell stocks and other goods to buy gold. This totally depleted the gold reserve of the United States Treasury, and for the first time since the 1870s, the gold reserve fell below 100 million. By 1894, a quarter of the railroads were bankrupt, including famous names like Erie, B&O, Santa Fe, Northern Pacific, and Union Pacific. The unemployment rate continues to skyrocket in 1894. 1 out of every 5 workers were unemployed. A heat wave struck the farm belt west of the Mississippi River, resulting in a drought. Corn withering in the fields, and cotton fell way below the break-even point. As conditions worsened, people became restless and angry. People stood on every corner of the streets, angry at everyone and everything. There was even talk of a revolution. The farmers and the unemployed started to band together to bring about change. These farmers and unemployed were involved in over 1,400 strikes. One of the strikes they were involved in was one under a man named Jacob Coxey. Coxey wanted Congress to pass the Coxey Good Roads Bill, which would authorize the printing of $500 million in paper money to finance road construction. As they marched to Washington as Coxey's army, it brought nationwide attention.
Relief efforts did not come close to meeting the needs of the unemployed. With no aid forthcoming from business or government, workers erupted in protest. 1894 alone witnessed more than 1,300 strikes involving more than 500,000 workers.
The most famous demonstration of that depression was Joseph Coxey's army. Joseph Coxey decided to protest these conditions and to try to get the federal government to provide some relief to all the unemployed. And he just started marching from the West Coast, and he began gathering people around him as he marched from city to city, who became part of Coxey's army. And they did march on Washington and petitioned.
To continue, when Coxey reached Washington, he made it to the foot of the Capitol steps, but police were on him and Cleveland had him arrested for 20 days. Armies started to reduce, but discontent did not. After Coxey's arrest, one of the largest strikes in the country's history occurred, the Pullman Strike. Employees of the Pullman Palace Car Company struck to protest wage cuts, continuing high rents, and layoffs. On June 26, 1894, the American Railway Union under Eugene V. Debs joined the strike by refusing to handle trains that carried Pullman's sleeping cars. Within a few hours, the strike had paralyzed the western half of the nation. Grain and livestock could not reach markets and factories had to shut down due to the lack of coal. The strike made its way into 27 states and territories as the day progressed. In Washington, Grover Cleveland decided to break the strike on the grounds that it obstructed delivery of the mail. On July 2nd, Cleveland sent troops to Chicago to take back control of the railroads and restore order. Cleveland tried to stay out of the Panic of 1893, hence why he only made small interventions. However, Cleveland was sure that he knew the cause of the panic, the Sherman-Silver Purchase Act. He believed had damaged business confidence, drained the Treasury's gold reserve, and caused the panic. At this point, Cleveland knew what he had to do to resolve the situation, repeal the act. In June 1893, Cleveland summoned Congress into special session, and on November 1, 1893, he signed the repeal of the act into law. The repeal of the Sherman Purchase Act was for the best. It responded to the realities of international finance, reduced the flight of gold out of the country, and boosted business confidence again. At this point, towards the end of 1894, the United States economy slowly began fixing itself. America started to come out of the Depression and unemployment rates slowly started to stabilize. Like said, business confidence was boosted and investors trusted the stock market again and began investing their money in there. Although the Panic of 1893 hurt the nation and had lasting effects, the emergence of the Populist or the People's Party was introduced in 1892 from the Farmers' Alliance. The Populists believed in the people, and this term was created to help the farmers. These populists gained recognition during the panic due to the failing of industrialists, and people started to question the gold standard. The populists grew in politics and began getting representatives, state legislators, and senators, which later on these populists ran William Jennings Bryan as a candidate for presidency. Populism is still a term used today in some presidential debates because some candidates look out for the good of the common person. Overall, the Panic of 1893 was the worst economic depression in the country's history at that time, but it helped to bring about the rise of the populists and shape the way for the progressive era.